Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and in today's video I wanted to go over Clive, Ifrit's Dominant. And out of a lot of the different spoilers from Final Fantasy, this one has got me pretty excited because I love mono red. It is my favorite color in Magic the Gathering, and I feel like this could be one of the best mono red options as far as commander goes that I've seen in a while. But before I do dive into the commander, as a couple quick reminders, I do have a Patreon link down below in the description if you want to support the channel. Also in the description is my TCG player affiliate link if you are looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. If you're wanting to build around Clive, all you have to do is click on it, shop for them, and that's really it. And that definitely helps support the channel a ton. And so now with those said, let's get it started. Let's talk about Clive and how to build around him. Alright, so first things first, let's read what the commander does. So Clive, for 4 and 2 red, it's a legendary creature, human, noble warrior. When it does enter, you may discard your hand and then draw that many cards equal to the devotion of red. So basically, just by itself, Clive has 2 red pips in its mana cost, and if you don't have any other pips on the battlefield, you're going to be discarding your hand and drawing 2 cards, which isn't the greatest. Of course, the ceiling can be huge. Let's just say you have a total of 10 pips on the battlefield, and that does include enchantments, creatures, artifacts, and more. You get to discard your hand and draw 10 cards. So that by itself is pretty powerful. Of course, there is another ability. You can pay 4 and 2 red, tap it, exile Clive, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery, and it will flip into Ifrit, Warden of Inferno, and this is a legendary enchantment creature, Saga Demon, and it has 3 different lore chapters. And not to mention that it has a 9/9 body because that's important for the first lore chapter. It fights up to 1 other target creature, and that's interesting how this is a red card because usually green does fight some targets, though there has been some red cards in Magic the Gathering's past where another creature fights another creature. Besides that point, it's pretty good removal. However, it has 2 other lore chapters with Brimstone. Add 4 red mana. If Ifrit has 3 or more lore counters on it, exile it, then return it to the battlefield, and so then it returns back to your commander's front side, which also has the ETB all over again of discarding your hand and drawing that much cards equal to the devotion. And what's pretty neat too is the fact that you're going to have 4 red mana floating in the air. So if you wanted to go back to it, all you have to do is pay 2 additional mana, tap your commander, flip it back to Ifrit, Warden of Inferno, and repeat that process all over again. So overall, I gotta say I'm pretty excited about this commander. It could be good in the 99 of some decks. However, as a commander itself, building around it, this can be quite powerful, especially when you lead into that mono red devotion a little bit more. But now it does bring me to the video summary. What are we planning on achieving with this deck? And it is pretty simple. First, we're going to focus on the early game. We want to get our commander out by ramp and card draw, just talking about the basics. Following that, I will then discuss mono red devotion because we want to have as much red pips on the battlefield as possible so that we could draw an insane amount of cards. Then lastly, I will discuss some win cons. Even though our commander can act as a win con too, because if we flip it into the backside, it has a 9 power and 9 toughness. That is quite huge. It can act as a win con all by itself by swinging at people enough times. However, first things first, let's talk about the basics. So like I mentioned previously, ramp and card draw are essential in any kind of deck. Because you are in red, most likely you're going to have to rely on artifact ramp like Liquid Metal Torque or Mind Stone. I really like Liquid Metal Torque because you can turn a target permanent into an artifact, and because we have artifact removal, we could just destroy some permanents left and right. And if you wanted to take your ramp a step above, you could use something like Nyx Lotus, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, or even Throne of Eldraine. Of course, with Nyx Lotus and Nykthos, you are basically adding mana based off your devotion to red, which depending on circumstances can net you a ton of mana. I also really like Throne of Eldraine. Even though it is 5 mana, it can tap for 4 mana and can act as card draw by paying 3 and tapping it, drawing 2 cards. Outside of artifact ramp, you may want to consider rituals because red is really good at rituals. Something like Jessica as well, even though it is a game changer, can really help us out. It could act as pseudo card draw, exiling the top 3 cards of our library and playing them, or add red mana equal to the number of cards in an opponent's hand. You could use other cards like Seething Song, which will net you 2 additional mana when you cast it, or even Mana Geyser. Depending on how much lands are tapped on the battlefield on your opponent's side, you could really amplify the amount of mana in your mana pool. Of course, you will also want to have card draw in the deck. Most likely it's going to be in the form of discarding your hand and drawing cards with your commander, but there are also some other options. Something like Decaying Time Loop can be great because it does have Retrace, and you discard all the cards in your hand then draw that many cards. The same can be applied for the new Will of the Jeskai guy. Each player may discard their hand and draw 5 cards, and if you have the other ability, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until on a turn the flashback cost is equal to the mana cost. And this could be significantly powerful because of course we're putting cards into our graveyard, why not get a second chance at them? I also find Mazzolanti, the Great Door, to be significantly powerful in the deck. As a tap ability to draw a card and the discard a card, that's okay, but of course if you have 4 more permanent types among cards in your graveyard, you could pay for and tap it and flip it into the core. And this is probably one of the best mana accelerations you could have in the deck. You could tap it at X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So if you have, let's just say, 20 permanents in your graveyard, well, look at that, you could just tap for 20 mana. Another card I absolutely love is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. When it enters the battlefield, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards +1. And if you have enough board counters on it, you can flip it into Tekutlin Searing Rift, where you can tap it for a red mana. And whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by this, you discover X, where X is that spell's mana value, so that's great. Getting discover triggers is really powerful. Another way we could get serious card advantage if our commander is out on the battlefield is by using clones. So something like Heat Shimmer, Molten Duplication, Twin Flame can copy our commander, or really any other creature we control, but most likely we want to copy our commander. Even though the legendary rule will apply, we still will get that ETB of discarding our hand and drawing equal to our devotion. And there's also some other cards we may want to copy outside of our commander too, that I'll discuss later on. So again, we are drawing an insane amount of cards and discarding them into the graveyard. There are a lot of great payoffs that we could take advantage of in the deck. The first card might seem small and insignificant, but trust me, Anger is probably one of the better cards you could utilize in the deck, mainly because it is a haste outlet. If you put it in the graveyard, creatures you control have haste, and that is important because of course with our commander, it does have a tap ability, and if we want to use it right away, we can transform it into the other side. And of course, if we are leaning into that aggressive strategy, Fear of Missing Out can be pretty good too. Whenever it enters, you discard a card, then draw a card, and it has the Delirium ability of giving you an extra combat, so that is pretty powerful itself, helps us put cards into our graveyard. And if we do have Ifrit out on the battlefield, we could swing in with it twice. There are some also great discard payoffs. Of course, Glinthorn Buccaneer and Brawlin Skyshark Rider. Whenever you discard a card, you deal 1 damage to each opponent, and that's all I really care about, especially with this type of deck, where if we discard, say, 5 cards, we get to deal 5 damage with these 2 out on the battlefield. Another additional payoff would be Monument to Endurance. I've been putting this in a lot of different decks that focus on discard. This is incredible. Whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, so you either get to draw a card, create a treasure token, and each opponent loses 3 life. So let's just say you have 3 cards in your hand and you discard all of them to draw that many cards. Well, you get all 3 of those benefits of drawing a card, making a treasure token, and making each opponent lose 3 life. This is great because it's colorless, it's easy to cast on the battlefield, and if you wanted to take it a step further, you may want to consider Surly Badgesaur, mainly because of course you are discarding cards, and depending on the type, you do get additional benefits of either putting a 1/1 counter on Surly Badgesaur, making a treasure token, or making Surly Badgesaur fight another creature an opponent controls. All for 4 mana. This could provide you immense value, probably more than Monument to Endurance. Other ways we could benefit off of our cards in our graveyard is by using cards like Mizzix's Mastery or Pass in Flames, where we could essentially get a second chance of those cards in our graveyard. I especially like Mizzix's Mastery because if you overload it, and depending on what kind of cards are in your graveyard, you could potentially win the game. Speaking of winning the game, let's talk about some win cons, and we're going to do it the old-fashioned way of devotion. And again, we want a lot of pips on the battlefield, and weirdly enough, a lot of damage doublers and triplers have a high amount of pips. So let's start off small with Torbrand. It has 3 pips, and of course if a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent the opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. So let's just amplify the damage a little bit more, especially if we fight with our commander. But why add an additional 2 mana when you could just essentially double the damage with Gratuitous Violence or even Twin Flame Tyrant? I love both of these cards, mainly because Twin Flame Tyrant is a dragon after all. However, they do have a decent amount of red pips, or we could draw a bunch of cards with our commander or with other mono red devotion kind of stuff. And doubling the damage is definitely something we want to do, especially with our commander, because if it fights one other target creature, it will deal 18 damage to that creature. And not only that, if we swing in with Ifrit, instead of 9 damage, it would be 18 damage. But why stop there at a damage doubler when we could do damage triplers like Fiery Emancipation and City on Fire? And of course, everything I said previously about damage doublers can be applied for damage triplers. If we have Ifrit on the battlefield, it'll deal 27 damage to another opponent, essentially knocking them out. Of course, that is all based off of if they don't have any creatures to block with. And again, just as a reminder, the reason why I am mentioning these damage triplers or doublers is the fact that they do have a good amount of pips. With Fire Emancipation and City on Fire, they each have 3 pips, so that works quite well. But of course, course, we can win with devotion itself. One example of this would be Thunderous Might. You can enchant creature. When enchanted creature attacks, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is your devotion to red. So this could really scale with the game, and especially if you had damage triplers, we could swing in for a huge amount of damage. But I did save the best for last, and this one is easily the best win con of the entire deck. This definitely exemplifies what red wants to do, and it wants to deal a ton of damage. Fanatic of Mogus for 3 and a red. When it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red. So of course, if you have some of those damage triplers or doublers, along with some other devotion cards, you could seriously stack the damage so high that you might just wipe out a couple of people. And this is also another reason why I did add in some clone effects like Molten Duplication or Twin Flame, because if we make another copy of Fanatic of Mogus, well, most likely we're definitely going to be killing somebody on the table for sure. So again, I really like the design of this commander. Obviously, it's going towards the burn route because that's mainly what red can do. It could also go into a self-discard theme, but outside of that, burn is definitely one of the better options that you could take advantage of. But that will do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video. I do think this commander is pretty neat. Just having a great ETB and wanting to flip it into Ifrit can be pretty viable as a fun commander. Also, I gotta say, Ifrit's art looks incredible too. I've never seen Ifrit in my life, but I love this card so much I might consider building it. I feel like I've been saying that about a couple of these Final Fantasy commanders, but we'll see what the future holds. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Clive? Do you plan on building yourself? What other Final Fantasy commanders would you like me to build around? So if you can, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.